we don't have great insight into why we do the things we do. We can't think through every single decision we make because we'd be stuck in not doing anything if that was the case. And so it is efficient to have like these kind of gut reactions. But at the same time, I mean, that leads to often things like discrimination and prejudice because a lot of that is really available.
What you pay attention to ends up informing, I guess, like your surroundings and your sense of well-being.
Yeah, I mean, perspective is everything, right?
Yeah.
And definitely getting out of our own heads to the extent we can is important. One of my colleagues has done some like really, Jamie Pennebaker has done some really interesting work about the effects of having people write about their experiences and write about themselves. And there's great, mental health benefits to doing that. And part of that is kind of externalizing things, getting you to reflect on things. And that even, health-wise, mental health-wise, but I think also he's done some work on relationships. So writing about a relationship can help strengthen it.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite people ever. I've done his journal exercise twice.
Oh, okay.
On two different moments, and I've talked about it so many times on the show, and it has changed my life significantly. Like it is to a point where like I saw like weight loss visually, and then mentally there's a clear. So no, it's so cool. And then for those who are just listening, is essentially it's just expressive writing can really help you go through traumatic moments, essentially, right? Just like really intentional. And then another thing that it was reminding me of what you were saying is that we can predict what people are thinking about by paying attention to what it is that they say. So I've seen videos of people who do like a form of hypnosis, and the way in that they do that is that later in this clip, they ask them to say, okay, hey, I'm going to guess what animal that you're thinking of. You're going to draw on a piece of paper. I'm going to guess what animal you're thinking of. And then they say elephant. And then they're like, holy shit, it was an elephant. But then leading up before that, they then reveal that multiple times throughout the interaction with that person, they mentioned an elephant, or they mentioned something big, or they mentioned something gray.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah, and that's a perfect example of like we don't know, we don't have great insight into why we do the things we do, and so you can basically plant the seeds of things that make say the word elephant more available, or the idea of an elephant more available, and so somebody will choose that and will think, oh well, I'm
free will.
It's free will, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Where it's like,
not so much.
Not so much.
Holy cow. So knowing that, is there a way for us to become more aware of the decisions that we're making?
Yeah. I mean, part of it is reflecting sometimes and not going immediately with like your gut instinct. Daniel Kahneman kind of and others have talked about like System 1 and System 2, or system, which I think is an awful way of referring to things because it's so arbitrary, but this idea that you have fast, intuitive thinking, and then you have the slower, more deliberative, and things like and the fast stuff is we can't think through every single decision we make because we'd be kind of stuck in not doing anything if that was the case. And so it is efficient to have like these kind of gut reactions. But at the same time, I mean, that leads to often things like discrimination and prejudice because a lot of that is really available. Even if you're completely anti-racist, you're growing up in a racist society, and so a lot of those tropes are there in your head, and so so people talk about implicit bias. So this unconscious bias, and one way of overcoming that is stepping back and being like, okay, what are the factors? Like maybe if I have to evaluate somebody for a job, okay, what are the instead of being like, I just don't feel good about the person, or maybe they don't feel professional, stepping back and being like, okay, what are the features that I'm looking for in this, like say hiring decision, and comparing people, this feature, this feature, this feature, this feature. So basically making it more deliberative, kind of, and often kind of leveling the playing field.
Super interesting. And as you were saying that, I'm trying to think of like how to be informed on when to take a system 1 versus system 2 reaction. And system 1 is gut essentially, and system 2 is more deliberate thinking.
Exactly.
And from how I've been able to navigate life, sometimes well, sometimes not, but from the moments of like reflecting on it, is much of it can be emotion based, not necessarily acting in emotions, because that typically doesn't work out well for anyone. But like when you were saying that there might be a prejudice that exists. So if I'm thinking of if I see someone, or if someone sees someone, then if there's like an emotion that is negative about them, then okay, then that's reacting essentially on that negative emotion would be a failure of decision making. So you wouldn't want to go towards the immediate gut instinct of system 2, whereas then you could open it up and say, okay, where does this fear lie? Like what is the reason behind that? Why do I have this emotional trigger in any case? But no, that's go ahead.
Well, and I mean, definitely when you have like a big decision to make, you know, thinking it through. And that's not to say that your gut reaction is always wrong, but you know, examining it and thinking it through. Because again, you know, part of you know, sometimes people have talked about like, you know, why you should go with your gut feeling and why you should trust it, but because you might be picking up on cues that are just not accessible to your conscious mind. But especially for, you know, kind of big decisions and making judgments, especially ones that affect people and like their lives, thinking it through is really important.